Alright, so I'm not here today. I'm home with sick kid and in Paris. So if you could just take out your packet, I'll talk you through page 105 to 130, and then you'll read up to 155 for tomorrow. So going on a little bit. So if you remember, we've kind of been talking about a lot of things Holden does in this book usually um, relate to something that just happened to him, right? So he has an experience or he thinks about something which makes him feel a certain way, and then usually what he does next kind of responds to that. So after seeing with prostitute, and then he got beat up by Maurice, then he decides to make a couple phone calls. So on page 105, he first thought about giving Jane a buzz. So if you were thinking communication is your theme to be writing about for the what the book argues for, that would be a good section because he's feeling pretty bad. And first he thinks about calling Jane, but decides not to. So then he decides to give Sally Hayes a call and sets up a date. Um, Even though he doesn't like Sally Hayes all that much. I think he thinks she's cute, and they neck a lot, but that's about it. Going on page 107, he's talking about his parents a little bit. We don't have too much information about them, but half the time he ends up spending a lot of money. I'm a spendthrift at heart. What I don't spend, I lose. Half the time I sort of even forget to pick up my change at restaurants and nightclubs and all. It drives my parents crazy. Can't blame them. My father's quite wealthy, though. I don't know how much he makes. He's never discussed that stuff with me, but I imagine quite a lot. He's a corporation lawyer. Those boys really haul it in. Another reason I know he's quite well off, he's always investing in shows on Broadway. They always flop, though, and it drives my mother crazy when he does it. So this would be a good quote to get down. She hasn't felt too healthy since my brother Allie died. She's very nervous. That's another reason I hated like hell for her to know that I was getting the axe. Okay, so he goes from thinking about his mom and worrying about his mom, and then he meets up with some nuns on page 108. So another kind of theme that we had talked about is authenticity versus phoniness, and I think the nuns are two characters, and there's only so many of them in the book that Holden values them and finds them to be not fake, phony people, and the nuns are a couple of them. So he sits down with the nuns, and on page 108, they were with these very inexpensive-looking suitcases. The ones that aren't genuine leather or anything. It isn't important, I know, but I hate it when someone has cheap suitcases. It sounds terrible to say it. I can't even get to hate somebody just looking at them if they have cheap suitcases. And so he talks about this story about this former roommate he had, who Holden had much nicer suitcases than he did. And he put his suitcases away, and the next day, this kid, Mark Cross, took them out. The reason he did it, it took me a while to figure out, was because he wanted people to think the bags were his. He was a very funny guy that way. He was always saying snotty things about them, my suitcases, for instance. He kept saying they were too new and bourgeois. That was his favorite word. Okay, and the reason Holden doesn't like this is another one example of those superficial things, right? Holden doesn't like when people get judged on their outward appearance or the way they look or the way they act.
6011.
Yeah, Miss Meyer. Page 109, the thing is, it's really hard to be roommates with people if your suitcases are much better than theirs. If yours are really good ones and theirs aren't. You think they're intelligent and all the other person, they don't and have a sense of humor, but they don't usually care whose suitcases are better. But they do. They really do. It's one of the reasons why I room with stupid bastard like Stradlater. At least his suitcases were as good as mine. Going on, he starts talking to the nuns. Now, the nuns would be, as I said, characters that he finds to be authentic. And he talks about, they end up talking about Romeo and Juliet, and so, Holden's talked about how badly he does in school, and how he's not smart, and how everyone in his family is a lot smarter than he is. But on the bottom of 110, top of 111, he talks about all these books he read. And if you remember back to 9th grade, when they were talking about Romeo and Juliet, you can understand probably why he liked Mercutio so much, because he finds, Romeo and Juliet to be pretty phony people. But Mercutio was much more, Mercutio really does his own thing. I mean, I like them, I don't, but they get pretty annoying sometimes. I mean, I felt much sorrier when old Mercutio got killed than Romeo and Juliet did. Thing is, I never liked Romeo too much after Mercutio gets stabbed by that other man, Juliet's cousin. What's his name? Tybalt. That's right, Tybalt. It was Romeo's fault. I mean, I liked him the best in the play, old Mercutio. He was very smart and entertaining and all. The thing is, it drives me crazy if somebody gets killed, especially if somebody very smart and entertaining and all, and it's somebody else's fault. Romeo and Juliet, at least it was their own fault. Okay, so if you're looking at authenticity, you could bring in both the nuns, because they are doing good charitable work, just because I think it's important to do good charitable work. They don't have fancy suitcases, they're not eating fancy breakfast, they're just doing what they think is right. And also Mercutio as a character would be a little detail you could bring in, because he kind of fits that character mold pretty well. On 112, so Holden tries to make a donation. Um, You've been more than generous, she said. You're a very sweet boy. She certainly was nice. She reminded me a little bit of old Ernest Morrow's mother, the one we met on the train. And she smiled mostly. We've enjoyed talking to you so much. So then on page 112, getting back into the phoniness thing and more that superficial label like with the suitcases, he said, but talking about Catholics are always trying to find out if you're Catholic. Happens to me a lot, I know. Catholics aren't even trying to find out if you're a Catholic, even if they don't know your last name. There was this one Catholic boy at Wooten School. He said, did you happen to notice where the Catholic Church is in town by any chance? The thing was, you could tell by the way he asked me that he was really trying to find out if I was Catholic. He really was. Not that he was prejudiced or anything, but he just wanted to know. He was enjoying the conversation about tennis and all, but you could tell he would have enjoyed it a lot more if I was Catholic. That kind of stuff drives me crazy. I'm not saying it ruined our conversation or anything. It didn't. But it sure didn't do any good. That's why I was glad those two nuns didn't ask if I was Catholic. It's just like those suitcases I was telling you about, in a way. All I'm saying is it's no good for a nice conversation. That's all I'm saying. Okay? Then he gives him $10, which I think is quite a bit. And then on page 114, 115, some more good evidence if you're writing about authenticity. He then compares the nuns to the other women that he could think of. Sally Hayes' crazy mother standing outside the department store and collecting dough for poor people in a beat-up straw basket. My aunt's pretty charitable, but she's very well dressed and all, and when she does anything charitable, she's always very well dressed and has lipstick on and all that crap. Which means she's doing this to get attention, right? She's not just doing it because she thinks it's an important thing to do like the nuns, but she's doing it for the reaction. And old Sally Hayes' mother. If they just dropped dough in her basket, then walked away without saying anything to her, ignoring it all, she'd quit in about an hour. She'd get bored. That's what I liked about those nuns. You could tell for one thing that they never went anywhere swanky for lunch. It made me so sad when I thought about it. They're never going anywhere swanky or for lunch or anything. I knew it wasn't too important, but it made me sad anyway. Okay, on bottom 114, top of 115, we're going to finally learn kind of what the title of the book's about. So he buys this record for Phoebe called Little Shirley Beans. It was about a little kid that wouldn't go out of the house because two of her front teeth were out and she was ashamed not to. Okay, so it's another kind of, he values innocence and trying to do something nice for his sister. And then, one nice thing, as he was walking, this family that you could tell just came from some church were walking right in front of me. Father and mother, a poor little kid about 6 years old. The kid was swell. He was walking in the street instead of the sidewalk right next to the curb. He was making out like he was walking a very straight line, the way kids do, and the whole time kept singing and humming. I got up closer so I could hear what he was saying. He was singing the song, If a Body Catch a Body Coming Through the Rye. If he had a pretty little voice, too. He was singing just for the hell of it, you could tell. He kept on walking to the curb and saying, If a body catch a body coming through the rye. It made me feel better. It made me not feel so depressed anymore. So even if you just write down kids singing the song on page 115, kids singing the Catcher in the Rye song, okay, we don't quite know how that fits with the whole rest of the book, but it's going to be important a bit later. And when you're taking notes for your paper, even if you just write down a little incident like that, it may be something that's useful for your writing later. He talks about Hamlet. And go to page 119. So he goes to look for Phoebe in the museum, Museum of Natural History. And that would be another good symbol to jot some stuff down about. And he talks about, he sees this little kid who's going skating. She was having a hell of a time in the Zone 119, tightening up her skate. She didn't have any gloves on or anything, and her hands were all red and cold. I gave her a hand with it. Boy, I hadn't had a skate key in my hand for years. It didn't feel funny, though. You could put a skate key in my hand 50 years from now, and in the pitch dark, and I'd still know what it was. She thanked me and all when I had tightened it for her. She's a very nice kid, polite little kid. God, I love it when kids are nice and polite when you tighten their skate for them or something. Most kids are. They really are. Okay? So, if you're writing about authenticity, he values kids because they do their own thing, right? They're not worried about what other people think. They're not doing things for others. They're doing things because they want to. So on page 120 and 121, even if you just write down Natural History Museum and those pages, that would be good. So he's walking over there, and it always smelled like it was raining outside, even if it wasn't, and you were the only nice, dry, cozy place in the world. I love that museum. So then he talks about the things he liked about it. On page 121, first of all, we get a little bit of weirdness. On page 121, he said, the birds nearest, in the diorama, the birds nearest you were all stuffed and hung up on wires, and the ones in the back were just painted on the wall, but they looked like they were really flying south. And again, if Holden doesn't know where the ducks go, you would think he wouldn't know that birds fly south. But anyway, regardless. The best thing, though, is that the museum was that everything stayed right where it was. Nobody'd moved. You could go there 100,000 times, and that Eskimo would still be just finished catching those two fish. The birds would still be on their way south. The deers would be drinking out of the water hole. Nobody would be different. The only thing that would be different would be you. Not that you'd be much older or anything. It wouldn't be that exactly. You'd just be different, that's all. You'd have an overcoat this time, or the kid that was your partner in line last time at Scarlet Fever, or you have a new partner. Going on to page 122. I put on my old hunting hat, so another hunting hat mention, while he's doing this as he's walking over there. And I knew I wouldn't meet anybody out that knew me, but it was pretty damp out. Okay, so this is a little bit of a change. He's putting it on, there's nobody around that's going to know him, so he's, it's not quite the way he's going to wear it later, but he is wearing it for protection, like literally for protection, not just to make himself feel tougher. Here's a good quote. I thought about Phoebe, and I thought about how she'd see the same stuff I used to see, and how she'd be different every time she saw it. It didn't depress me to think about it. It didn't make me feel happy either. Certain things, they should just stay the way they are. You ought to be able to stick them in one of those big glass cases and just leave them alone. I know it's impossible, but it's too bad anyway. Anyway, I kept thinking about that as we walked. Okay, so museum's a good symbol because this is the way Holden would like to live his life. He would like to put Allie in one of those little dioramas and Phoebe in one of those dioramas and maybe himself, so they wouldn't have to grow up, they wouldn't have to change. But if you're writing about, how Holden's changing, at the end of this chapter he doesn't go in, right? And so he doesn't go in to kind of reminisce about the way things used to be. Then a funny thing happened. When I got to the museum, all of a sudden I wouldn't have gone inside for $1 million. It just didn't appeal to me. And here I'd walked through the whole park and looked forward to it and all. If Phoebe'd been there, I probably would have, but she didn't. Okay, so the fact that he doesn't go in, I think, is significant. Going on a little bit, we got 5 more pages to go through. So he shows up, Sally Hayes shows up for her date, and take a look at, sorry, I lost my page here. So on page 125, if you remember Stradlatter's dating technique, which borders on date rape, on page 125, we horsed around a little bit in the cab on the way over to the theater. At first, she didn't want to, because she had lipstick on and all, but I was being seductive and she didn't have any alternative. So the fact that she doesn't have any alternative leads me to believe he's behaving kind of in a way similar to what Stradlatter does on his date. And they go to a show, which Holden didn't want to go to because he thought it was phony, and it was filled with phony people. On page 126, what a deal that was. You never saw so many phonies in all your life. Everybody's smoking their ears off and talking about the play so that everyone could hear how sharp they were. Some dopey movie actor was standing near us having a cigarette. I don't know his name, but he always plays the part of the guy in the war movie that gets yellow before it's time to go over the top. And Sally runs into a former classmate, and Holden doesn't like that, and then they go skating. And go to page 130. I guess I'm going to save that part for discussion tomorrow. So you read page 130 up to 155. Please do keep taking notes. Your rewrites for your paper, for your Gatsby paper, are due 1 week from tomorrow, 1 week from Tuesday. And either end of this week or beginning next week, we'll start talking paper for Catching the Rye. So if you have any questions, I'll be back tomorrow.